Are people back?
I'm right here, Prof.
How is the SG?
No, I'm good. I'm good. It's going fine.
How is Bayema?
Wherever is good.
Okay.
Notes. Same with Ronald, he had beamed them up initially, so I don't know if you need them up or you just
yes,
want to go through them.
If there are any questions that have been posed, let's address them. Otherwise, you keep that record.
Most were recommendations.
Yeah.
So there you are, Prof.
Okay. Okay. Similarly, women in place of detention and hard to reach places must be covered under model law.
For the opportunity you gave him to be president of Zambia for about 6 years or so.
Who's that?
And also he says...
There's a cross line.
There's a cross line, please.
Yes, those are useful comments. There's something for you there. It has disappeared now. There was something on for similarly, women in place detention and hard to reach place must be covered under the model law. Maybe you want to comment on that, Eva?
Yes. No, most of these are the inclusive provisions, Judge.
and we shall closely
Yes.
study them and see where we can incorporate them explicitly so they come
Okay.
out, yeah, and not hidden in a general statement. Yes.
Great stuff.
Yeah, because
Are
when
there-
we broke up, I actually looked at the chat and I saw most of them can actually be considered. They are very good comments.
Oh, okay. Are there any questions from the chat you have seen you want to respond to?
Not really. Eh? Yeah, I think they're agreeing with some of the comments I was making. Like provocation
Okay.
is not enough excuse. Perpetrators are free to move away and the law needs to hold them accountable. Yes. Discussion on sexual harassment on young lawyers. There's awareness, but reluctance. At least we have done quite profoundly with sexual harassment in the model law. So we have taken good care of that. We may need to ensure that the model law explicitly refers to existing and responsive laws that can address various underlying causes. Yes, we've actually addressed the issues of responsiveness in the model law. Yeah, Zimbabwe has had similar discussion on sexual harassment for young lawyers. Okay, yeah. I think when Sally finally compiles her report and sends them to us, we can actually look at them. Look at these
Great
issues.
stuff. So Sally, you keep that record, all right?
Yes, thank you. And I'll be tracking as the meeting proceeds. And should the question come in, I'll be sending you a direct chat in case we miss some as we go. Thank you.
Great stuff. We'll need that record. It's important. So Eva, I think there are no further questions. I think you can continue.
I don't. Oh, I've just managed to switch off my.
Okay, I'm sure you come back to it.
Okay. Okay, can we see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So the model law is divided into various parts, which logically flow. So you find we have the preliminary provisions, we move on to human-based thing, and then access to justice, effective responsiveness, and then to the institutional frameworks. So the first part actually deals with preliminary provisions. These are general issues related to the substance of the GBV model law. These basically consist of sections on domestication, objective, scope, and application and interpretation. So the domestication is fully embedded in here, as you can see. And we are just in here urging member states to ensure there's full domestication of the model law and other international instruments based on gender-based violence. Then we have got the application and scope of the model law, which I've gone through with you. I would just like to ensure that I read it out to you because it's very important that we don't leave anything out. So it applies to all persons without distinction as to kind, such as race, color, sex, age, language, religion, nationality, political or other opinion, cultural beliefs or practices, property, birth or family status, sexual orientation, as you can see, gender, what have I done? Okay, gender identity, ethnic or social origin, or disabilities. Remember, there was a question on disability. It applies to persons with disabilities, taking into account the special needs and circumstances of women, children, and other vulnerable persons. Again, we are captured here. So the model law applies when the offense is committed within the territory of a member state on board a vessel or aircraft that is registered under the laws of a member state at the time the offense was committed, or by a national of a member state whose extradition is refused on the ground of nationality. So this is the scope. And we normally in model laws try to emphasize certain provisions by putting without an avoidance of doubt clause in order to assist the lawyers understand further what the requirements are. So if you look at this one, it says, for the avoidance of doubt, the model law applies to non-cohabiting or non-marital relationships in individuals with family relationships to one another, sexual relationships, members of the same household, including ascendants, descendants, persons related by blood or affinity, minors or disabled individuals under guardianship or custody, other persons residing in and employees of that household, spouse or former spouse, and violence against or between heterosexuals, lesbians, bisexuals, homosexuals, transgender persons, same-sex persons, non-binary persons, and sexual. So the avoidance of doubt clause emphasizes, just puts a lot of emphasis as to the scope of application of the law. Again, another important thing for you as lawyers is the conflict and review of national laws. Where there are conflicts or inconsistencies between customary, religious, and statutory law must prevail, and the matter shall be resolved with respect to the human rights of the victim. Remember, this law is based on human rights. It takes a human rights approach in handling GBV and to gender equality standards. Where there are conflicts or inconsistencies between gender-based violence laws with laws relating to family and divorce, property, housing, social security, and employment, the gender-based violence laws must prevail. And the legal framework that promotes women's human rights and gender equality and the elimination of violence against women shall apply. So you are actually taking a high-low approach where you are putting a superior position to be taken over an inferior position. So that's how we've given it high-level law status. That's what we have given GBV. Okay. So the processing of a case under customary law or religious law must not preclude it from being brought before the formal justice system. That just because the church is handling it, there's counseling there, or the traditional leader is handling it under the customary law system, does not in itself prevent the case going to the formal justice system. And I think this is important because sometimes the women and the vulnerable are intimidated in those systems. They are actually bowing to other customs that come into play when they're actually trying this so-called reconciliation under the customary or religious systems. These are offenses which have been committed, and they must, as far as is possible, enter the criminal justice system to be dealt with as an example to others not to engage into such a vice. So SMSS must amend any provisions of its laws, such as family and divorce laws, property laws, housing laws, social security laws, and employment laws that contradict or are inconsistent with this model law, or any law on gender-based violence, so as to ensure a consistent legal framework that promotes women's human rights and gender equality and eliminates gender-based violence. So you can see such a law, like a GBV law, when you are drafting it, it tends to have its tentacles in other laws, other systems, legal systems. But these need to be harmonized so that they are consistent. We don't want to create an inconsistencies so that by the time this poor lady is taking a case to court, she doesn't get justice. Because another law is actually stating otherwise. So please, we need to take great note of this very important issue. So SMSs must eliminate gender bias and ensure justice and fairness are accorded to victims in a manner that ensures dignity, protection, and respect. So that's the preliminary provisions relating to the scope. So that relating to extraterritorial, I've discussed it earlier again, but the key provision will look something like a member state must ensure that any law on gender-based violence shall have extraterritorial effect so as to meaningfully give effect to certain obligations and commitments made by the SMS under international instruments relating to gender-based violence. The law shall apply to an offense committed outside the territory of the member state when the offense is committed by a national of another member state, because this is like a form of reciprocity. You are a member of one organization, you have agreed to come up with this GBV law, so the reciprocity is already beginning to emerge just from the initial instruments. By a stateless person who has his or her habitual residence in a member state at the time of the commission of the offense, or against a victim who is a national of a member state. We don't want persons to cross-run. They are cutting borders in order to get away from a crime in another member state. We will not be achieving anything, because that same member state, that same perpetrator will actually go and commit the same crime in Botswana as he did in Zambia. And it will perpetuate, in fact, it will increase GBV. So let us get them from the source. Once you commit a crime in this member state, you run to Botswana, you can actually become prosecuted for the same offense. And then we've got a whole list of objectives. I won't go into them. I think you can read them. I'll just read the first one, which is that the objectives of this model law are to provide sets of concepts, principles, standards, measures, and interventions to assist SMSs to develop policies that support the enactment of efficacious and comprehensive national laws on gender-based violence. For example, provide prohibitions with respect to gender-based violence, access to justice, procedural fairness, measures, strategies, and interventions in key areas related to gender-based violence, without usurping. This is very important for us at SADC-PF to get this passed by our organs, without usurping the powers of national legislatures or national executives to initiate and enact national laws in their areas of competence and jurisdiction. We don't have the competence, but we are helping, we are assisting to bring in efficacious laws to SADC member states. And this is the tool that we are offering for doing so. Provide for legal rights, secure legal protections, and legal recourse for victims. So you'll see all these are based on international best practices, regional best practices, and local best practices. So we've merged all these legal concepts and principles and standards to create a very fundamental law that can actually protect victims and rehabilitate perpetrators and reintegrate them into society. So interpretation, you all understand what the interpretation section does in a law, but here I'm trying to ensure that I bring your attention to the fact that we have used definitions that we have derived from international agreements and other instruments. These are very helpful because it brings a global perspective to the entire model law, and it can be easily adapted by most member states. So you find there's common term words which are defined nationally, and we have stuck to those. There are three core issues that I want you to actually look at specifically in relation to the definitions, because it's like, again, without avoidance of doubt clause, it's an emphasis clause. We look at victim, for example, it says, means a person who has been subject to gender-based violence or discrimination, and who, individually or collectively, has suffered harm, including physical or mental injury, emotional suffering, economic loss, or substantial impairment of their fundamental rights through acts or omissions that are in violation of criminal laws, prescribing abuse of power, employment laws, or gender equity and equality laws in force in a member state, including a survivor, and the word survivor shall be construed accordingly. So you can see the term victim has incorporated the term gender-based violence. That's what we have done. And so we have closed it. We have locked it in. So we don't create any inconsistency. What do you mean gender-based violence? How come the victim is a victim who does not relate to the concept of gender-based violence? No, we made sure we locked it in. And then we have provided other support provisions, the avoidance of doubt clause. So for purposes of the definition of gender-based violence, have you seen? The following shall be included: domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, including sexual assault and sexual harassment, harmful practices, including early marriage, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, female infanticide, prenatal sex selection, election, it's both selection and election, virginity testing, HIV and AIDS cleansing, honor crimes, acid attacks, crimes committed in relation to bride price and dowry, maltreatment of widows, forced pregnancy, and trying women for sorcery or witchcraft, femicide, and we go on and on. Have you seen what we have done? We have actually locked in and then opened up to make it all inclusive, so that there's no way someone can escape and say this is not gender-based violence and this is not a victim of gender-based violence. So that's what we do. And it includes trafficking and slavery as well. Again, another without avoidance clause is for purposes of the division of victim. A person who has been subjected to gender-based violence or discrimination shall be a victim, regardless, now these are the essential words, regardless of whether the perpetrator is identified, apprehended, prosecuted, or convicted, or there is a familial relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. And where appropriate, includes the immediate family or dependents of the victim and persons who have suffered harm in intervening or assisting the victim or in trying to prevent victimization. So if I'm trying to help and I'm also beaten, I also go and report a gender-based violence offense. Again, the application and jurisdiction, I think I've gone through it, but the most emphasis here now is a broad application and jurisdiction provisions must be provided for effective coverage. We do not over-restrict. Make sure you have generalized broad provisions relating to GBV. So we go on to part 3, which deals with human rights breach approach. This is very appropriate for the judiciary, human rights-based organizations, prosecutors, legal aid practitioners, and service providers, meaning you as lawyers. This provision, I think, is so essential. Judge has already gone through it. I want to just go to some major key provisions. So the GBV model law ensures that effective domestication, as Judge has said, is incorporated into your gender-based violence laws. Some human rights must be restated. The only effective way of engaging in a human rights-based approach engaging in a rights-based approach is to actually restate the rights. Restate the rights. And you know, restating the right doesn't mean you are copying exactly the same words, but you are restating it in a way that it will effectively deal with GBV in the context in which you want it to be dealt with. So we have done that. We have done that. So the following are some indicative rights that are restated, and you can see. So we've restated all these rights, because when you look at the thread in all these rights, you'll see it touches on GBV. So please read them and see the reason why we've restated these. So, and then also another thing that we always forget as lawyers is that the policy direction is of equal importance as stating the right. You have to give a policy base. Otherwise, Parliament will find it very difficult to enact a provision relating to a specific area or jurisprudential area of the law that they want to ensure effectiveness. Okay, so the policy direction comes before that. So while restating the above rights and prohibitions, the GBV model law also guides SMS's state authorities to develop policies and strategies that can effectively eliminate GBV and execute administrative acts, provide appropriate services, and interpret GBV laws more effectively. For example, SMSs are encouraged in the GBV model law to pursue the following policy objectives: promote the equal representation and participation of all gender at all levels and sectors of decision-making, and ensure that gender is championed in all agendas. So if you look at this policy directive carefully, you'll see that we are heading and we are targeting women empowerment or gender empowerment. So you see why it's important to direct first the policy and then build on it to enact a law. 2, ensure gender mainstreaming into all policies, structures, systems, programs, and activities in order to make them gender responsive, transformative, and contribute to the effective achievement of sustainable socio-economic and political development. So you can see the definitions automatically are coming out, the core components of the definition. Take appropriate steps to modify or abolish existing laws that are discriminatory or non-inclusive, harmful stereotypes, customs, and practices which discriminate against women, including the girl child, adolescent girls, and young women. Develop an integrated framework for the empowerment of women, including the girl child, adolescent girls, and young women, and monitor the implementation of laws, policies, and programs that affect or have an impact on women, including girl child, adolescent girls, and young women. So all these are policy points. They must be contained in the policies of the government first. Then there's the issue of the international instruments and how you can strategize in making sure that your policy includes these. And these are the most appropriate for gender-based violence. I mean, they're fundamental. So whatever you do, even if you want to leave out some, please do not leave out these. And I've listed them. You can see I've listed them, making it much easier for you to actually go straight into these and incorporate them or domesticate them in any method that your country allows you to do. Some countries actually copy them in, and some other countries attach them as a schedule and so forth. Or they mention them just in their objectives clause, meaning their long title, they mention the instruments which they have domesticated. So it just matters a lot on your jurisdiction. So some notable provisions under this, under the gender human rights-based approach is the issue of discrimination. This one is much broader than the ones contained in most of your constitution. So it's if a person who performs any function or exercises any power of a competent authority, law enforcement, judicial institution, an appropriate authority, a service provider, traditional local leader, contravenes subsection 1, which is prohibiting discrimination. Please read it. It's very broad. The person shall immediately be arraigned and appropriate punishment be imposed on the person in accordance with the law. So your act of parliament must create this provision in the thing as a prohibition. Then a punishment, an appropriate punishment should be put in, which is comparable to the offense being created. So the government shall enact laws prohibiting all forms of discrimination and in the performance of public or private functions or exercise of public or private functions, including prohibiting of discrimination in economic and social life or activities, in accessing official documentation such as national identity, documents, health records, and qualification certificates. All these are so appropriate in dealing with gender-based violence. In educational and vocational training and learning and guidance, in and at a place of employment and recruitment, retentions, promotions, dismissals, and payment of remuneration and allowances, in the provision of health services and healthcare, and as otherwise provided in this model law. Then we go on for the right of life. We restate it in relation to GBV. We go on to protection from gender-based violence, how this can be done and the extent to which it must be done. So we've embedded there, for example, including being sold, enslaved, trafficked, or abducted by any person. So we've stated this right, the protection, in terms of GBV. So you just pay attention on how the risk-based statement has been done. So if you look at the third one, it says women have the right to refuse sexual acts, including acts within marriage and relationships that put the woman at risk of infection such as HIV or other sexually transmitted infections, and have the right to refuse any act not desirable by her, and such refusal shall not be a ground for divorce. So you can see, we have restated the protection clause in this manner. And this carries on. We can now hear, with each restated right, we actually provide for a policy base. And this is what we have done here. So if you read the model law, you'll see that's the trend. The right, the restated right, and the policy base. This one says the government shall put in place policies and special measures, including those outlined in this model law, to ensure that women and girls are accorded protection from gender-based violence. So necessary support is given to women and girls for the prevention, identification, reporting, referral, investigation, rehabilitation, and treatment of injury or illness resulting from gender-based violence, right? And it goes on and on. So laws against domestic violence give adequate protection to women and children and respect their bodily integrity and dignity. So all these are now policy directives which are being given to the government, so they are able to create their policies, thereafter enact laws. Then we restated the protection from inhuman treatment and security of persons in this manner. A person has the right not to be subjected to torture, I think I left out the word, be treated or punished in a cruel, inhuman, or degrading manner. I just left out a B there. A person has a right to security of the person, which includes the right not to be subjected to human trafficking and slavery. All these are components of GBV. A member state shall ensure that all relevant competent authorities comply with legal, administrative, and surveillance systems provided in this model law and the law for the protection of victims. So you see a policy point comes out there. Then we have got these general policy directions for achieving now the human rights which we have restated. So we say the government shall develop gender-based violence policies and strategies, implementation plans, incorporating response, preventative, supportive, and protective measures specified in this model law, including the following: promoting the equal representation and participation of women and men at all levels and sectors of decision-making, and ensuring that gender is championed in all agenda. Enacting nationality laws, incorporating proper safeguards on nationality and other laws adequately protecting refugees and stateless persons. ensuring gender mainstreaming in all policy, we've read that one, taking appropriate steps to modify or abolish existing laws, customs, blah, blah, blah. Developing an integrated framework for the empowerment of women, monitoring the implementation of laws, policies, and programs that affect or have an impact of women. And it goes on, providing funds, which is very, very important, providing adequate support to victims, ensuring that the location of such support services are easily accessible. Someone brought up the question of disability, but that is also an issue of accessibility of these services and infrastructure, providing access to healthcare, including reproductive healthcare and so forth. So that is our approach to human rights and its restatements with directory policies to ensure that we leave no gap uncovered. The next part deals with access to justice. Again, this applies very much to the lawyers. So the first part, we actually provide for access to justice and procedural protections. There's quite a lot of information in this part. Time won't allow me to actually go into all of it, and I'll just urge you to read, understand, and persuade the incorporation of these new policies into your national laws. So the victim has a right to access justice in a manner stipulated in Part 3 of the model law. So please look at that. So some of the rights include reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of any judicial institution proceeding or parole proceeding involving the crime of GBV or any release or escape of an accused. Sometimes you find an accused person has been released without even the victim knowing that that person is no longer in prison. The prosecution has stopped. So now a victim has a right to be told about all those issues, to be informed of their rights, to seek restitution from the offender or compensation from the state. So in this part, the access to justice part is very closely related to the human rights aspects of GBV. So all these things, putting support services in the courts and so forth, access to free legal aid, the right to speak to a female officer where possible, and this one is important. Claims of self-defense by women who have been victims of violence are taken into account in investigations, prosecutions, and sentencing. Because a woman injures the perpetrator and she's prosecuted for murder, for what or whatever. So she has a right to be heard on these issues and to use that as a defense, that I was actually being beaten up. A crime of GBV was being committed against me, and that was my reaction. So she got that right to be taken into account, ensuring that evidentiary rules are non-discriminatory and the outmoded cautionary rule. Remember how they caution a cautionary rule, the admissibility of hearsay evidence, and the drawing of inferences from the absence of previous consistent statements or from the length of delay between when the offense took place and when the victim reported it to the police or other law enforcement officers should not be admissible. The following are also included. Introduction of the complainant's sexual history in both civil and criminal proceedings is prohibited. They start saying, this one is just a prostitute. I nearly used a Zambian word, atiwule, you know. They start claiming that she's a prostitute and introducing this to actually justify GBV. Evidence of prior acts of violence, abuse, stalking, and exploitation by the perpetrator is considered during judicial proceedings in accordance with the principles of national criminal law. Legal defenses such as honor or provocation cannot be invoked by perpetrators of violence against women to escape criminal responsibility in GBV cases. And people who perpetrate acts of violence against women and children while voluntarily under influence of alcohol, drugs, or other substances are not exempted from criminal responsibility. We can't take that. So you can see There's a lot in relation to access to justice. There's a lot of legal rules and standards which currently stand, which we are persuading modification. Otherwise, we won't be able to deal with GBV. Huh? Okay, all this I persuade you just to read. It's so much in detail. You can see I've listed a lot of issues that must be taken into account. So let us look at effective response to GBV. This GBV law actually is very, very good at setting provisions which will stimulate a quick and effective response to GBV, whether it takes place or public or private institution or place of employment. That's addressing acts of gender-based violence that are about to take place or have already taken place. So it helps the prevention and also the prosecution aspect because it has taken place. So we provide in the model law how you can report, assess, investigate, and duly prosecute a case of GBV and make a decision which is appropriate in that case. We also provide for how you can execute in a timely manner, meaning expeditiously, a GBV decision, so that the rights of the complainant victims are observed and respected at all times, and for all irrespective of status and documentation. Sometimes they ask you for over documentation. You find a poor stateless person has no identity card, they have no passport, they have no immigration papers, but they're so battered, they won't take up their case. So in this case, we are persuading member states that in case of GBV, please disregard documentation and look at the offense that has been cured and give justice to the victim. So you find this part we have provided for efficient and simplified procedures and processes for handling reports of GBV and internal complaints at places of work or other public and private institutions with regard to reporting, receiving, assessing, investigating, determining and appealing a GBV report or appealing a GBV report or complaint without reprisals. So we tackle quite a lot sexual harassment at places of work or just GBV at places of work. We've heard quite a number of times how women are just punched just from having a different opinion at a place of work. A male one gets so tempered and they just go across the desk and punch these women. So we've provided profoundly for such instances. We've provided for the process for referring and lodging a GBV report or complaint to an appropriate authority, such as the police, victim support units, human resource department, or human resource person dealing with GBV, or other appropriate authority or person or statutory body or ministerial department dealing with specifically with gender matters, children or women's affairs. So the procedures for request and submission of information, release and dissemination of information are adequately provided for. Collaboration on investigations and assessments of GBV reports or complaints with and among appropriate authorities are dealt with profoundly, so that there's no paralysis in the system. Everybody knows what they are doing and adequate collaborative machinery is actually put in. So there are some notable provisions in the model law, such as those dealing with simplified procedures and processes for effective response and referral. I urge you to read these because they are very, very long, but they are so fundamental in ensuring that GBV cases are actually received, investigated, assessed, and prosecuted. You can see they're very, very long. So I just urge you to go and read them. Time is not with us. Then part 6 deals with prohibitions, offenses, and sentencing. So the model law puts emphasis on the need by SMSs to take requisite legislative measures to prohibit GBV. Judge touched on this when he was talking about your international obligations in ensuring that you actually take these legislative and administrative measures to ensure that you are actually complying with your international obligations. So to provide adequate offenses on GBV and supportive measures or restraints to assist effective charging and prosecution of a GBV offense. This is the most difficult for the police because they say it's very difficult to charge for an offense under this Domestic Violence Act. The law, the prohibition is not clear. It's not clear what is the offense to be charged and decided on. So that's their main complaint, is this lack of our laws clarity. They are so ambiguous. So our law now, the GBV law, tries to assist in providing appropriate provisions that can be charged on and prosecuted. It also provides for supportive measures and restraints, which you can build on in order to provide for further prohibitions, which will come as a result of the major offense. So it's a build-up process. So, for example, any adverse inferences in a GB case where these are reported late, there should be no offense or false accusation. So these come up because of the GBV offense. So you can say, no, this case is out of time. You've reported it late. They should not be, meaning that we made up, everything is fine. Now, where has it come? How has it come? You see, there should be protection of the victim during legal proceedings. Sentences imposed should match gravity of the GBV offense without exceptions and reductions. And no mitigatory reasons or extenuating circumstances should be allowed. You find the father, even the wife, they say, no, he's the breadwinner, so if he goes in jail, my children will suffer, blah, 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 blah. So many extenuating circumstances and mitigatory reasons being given. At the end of the day, you find there's hardly any prosecutions on the GBV cases because they actually withdraw or give good reasons why the man should not be jailed. Then other notable provisions related to the actual prohibitions, the issues of collusion in gender-based violence offenses, we dealt with that. Other gender-based violence-related offenses are also dealt with. For example, a person who removes an organ from another person's body. That's a GBV offense, and you must create it. Takes away the child from the lawful mother of that child after she gives birth. That's a GBV offense. It's psychological. The mother, what will the mother go through? So you see, we create other gender-based violence offenses, which you find in most of your laws. You don't have these. So we urge you to put them in. They're quite a lot. Okay. And then we have specific prohibitions relating to gender-based violence, where the minister responsible for criminal justice system, in consultation with the minister responsible for justice, shall develop sentencing policies and penalties. I can assure you, I think even the research has shown that most countries in SADC do not have sentencing policy. Very few have them. We've been trying as draftsmen to persuade them to have sentencing policies so that it's easier for the law to take its course. So the sentencing policy must relate to eliminate all forms of gender-based, in order to eliminate all forms of gender-based violence, prevent and eliminate all harmful social and cultural practices, eliminate child marriages and forced marriages, restrict marriage brokering, abolish. I don't know. I thought it was typed.
There's a cross line.
Okay. So we've actually put guidance even to judiciary institutions. So if you look at 4, we say, despite any other law to the contrary, a judiciary institution shall not provide a reduced penalty or exculpate a perpetrator for an honor crime. Exculpate a perpetrator if the perpetrator subsequently marries the victim. You know, there's that culture that if he marries a victim, then he is let go. Provide for imposition of a lesser penalty for conviction of an offense due to the fact that the victim is a sex worker or non-virgin. No, the law must apply across the board, the same to everyone. So where a perpetrator is a repeat offender, a judicial institution shall impose a more severe penalty. So remember, Beatrice talked about multi-offenders. We have taken care of that as well. They must provide for a more severe penalty, regardless of the level of harm resulting from the gender-based violence. Because he's a repeat offender. So let's make him to stop. So you see, we've provided a lot of guidance to the judiciary, and we hope this can be read by you as lawyers. Then we have intervention programs for perpetrators and alternative sentencing, how you can actually come up with these programs to help perpetrators, give them alternatives and rehabilitate them, okay? So we provide for factors when imposing imprisonment. What do you take into account when doing so? Especially where the offense involves serious injury or death of the victim or another person, including the death as a result of a suicide. So we give guidance on how you can actually give the appropriate penalty. Okay. Chapter 7 deals with the protection, prevention, and intervention measures. These mainly, the emphasis is for service providers, community helpers, traditional and religious authority. But it won't do you any harm as lawyers to read through them. They are very educative, and they can also help your cases in court if these are not provided. And you can actually even take up mandamus proceedings to ensure that government puts these measures and interventions in place. But you must first include them in your national laws. In the protection, prevention, and intervention measures, some of the notable provisions relate to basic benefits and services to victims. All that you said in the morning, some of you in the comments, they are all here. The help services. You can see we have actually put them here. Immediate access to comprehensive and integrated services, including pregnancy testing, emergency contraception, abortion services, treatment for sexually transmitted diseases and injuries, post-exposure to this word always gets me, prophylaxis, and this is the one Beatrice complained of, psychosocial counseling, it's here for victims of sexual violence at the expense of it. And we provide, I tell you, we've done so much research. Everything is in this model law. All you have to do, I persuade you, is to read it. And you'll see you can easily make defenses. You can have a case which you can successfully prosecute and ensure a conviction. The question of protection orders, you're all very familiar with them. We have restated them there. We have strengthened the protection order provisions, what can be done, what can be obtained, and how you can protect the victim. So it's all here. Then part 8 deals with capacity building and awareness. This mainly, the emphasis is for government ministries, institutions, civil society, community helpers, traditional and religious authorities, and the media. Very important that these persons really receive adequate training. These are persons such as judges, police officers, social workers, and immigration officers for effective GBV dictation, prevention, investigation, prosecution, protection, and awareness on GBV, support for GBV victims, gender sensitivity judgments. Very important, the judges should now be looking at this issue and implementation of court decisions. We provide WC for activism, advocacy, and communication amongst various stakeholders, the media, traditional leaders, and community leaders, and neighbors and religious leaders. People don't know how effective neighbors are in dealing and preventing GBV. So we need to train people in the community at large. So other notable provisions are public awareness, how they are carried out nationwide, and how they are actually recorded, what to take into account to ensure that they are adapted as to age, gender, and nature of activities, and so forth. And they must also be carried out in schools and included in their curriculum. So a lot of sensitization has to take place amongst the community, amongst schools, universities. It's a lot of information. I'll just ask you to read them. Then the last part deals with general issues. This is for all stakeholders, how information and data is protected, how research and development must be encouraged, so as to ensure effective tracking of victims, ascertaining how GBV cases are handled and prosecuted. This information is very important if you are to deal effectively with GBV. Then the issue of financial resources and budgeting. The GBV is not a priority, as you know, for most governments, but we need to create it as a priority. We need to ensure it's adequately budgeted for and finances actually released to deal with all the programs and strategies and measures that we have put into this GBV law. Compliance, enforcement, and regulatory. Again, the model law assists in how these can be drafted into your national laws so that they are effective and actually can be relied on by various sectors that are dealing with GBV. Regular monitoring and evaluation reporting, also effective in relation to GBV, including issues of customary law, religious and national laws, policies and strategies. All these need effective evaluation and monitoring. Sorry, we have to end there. I'm sorry I had to rush because the time now is really not with us. We are now at, what's the time, Judge? It's already, I'm past my hour, it's 13:30. Yeah, I think I've just passed it by 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, Judge. I just tried to rush it and I ate up 20 minutes of your time. Thank you, Judge. I'm done, Judge. Thank you. I think Judge can't hear. SG?
Judge, still on unmute. We are trying to support from our end. There were 3 issues raised through the chat box. Is your diary generous to respond to them? Madam Eva?
Yes.
There were just
it
3.
would mean me reading them now. So it's better you put them on the thing. Otherwise, I'll just have to read all of them. But I want Judge to take over first because
yes,
I've just finished presenting.
Okay. Yes. I saw an indication from Justice Monaching, I think. I don't know whether it was a text or she wanted to comment or ask a question. Justice Monaching.
Professor, it's well, the author will look at it. I've referred her to 2 documents, of which I'm one of the international authors. In terms of language, sexual orientation and gender identity, it has expanded. Although these documents were produced by us and the affected groups. But I can tell you they take a very strong exception to us, their collaborators or their friends, not using the appropriate language. I referred you to the Yogyakarta principles and principles +10. But you can look at that, not now, and see whether you want to borrow that language.
Sure,
but
Judge.
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, Judge. We'll definitely look at those.
Great stuff.
Any information to strengthen our model law is very welcome. It's very welcome,
Yes,
Judge. And
yes.
we definitely
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Eva.
much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Angie. It's noted. Eva will look at it. Any other intervention or question?
I've seen one here, Judge, which
Yes.
says it's very much victim-centered.
Yes, I saw that.
We don't, yeah. But if you just that I was going very fast because of time, but we have dealt very, very profoundly with issues of the perpetrators as well. If you just take a bit of more time and read the gender-based violence law, we have actually dealt with perpetrators, how they are treated, how they are rehabilitated, and a lot of things relating to the perpetrators. But now I was just rushing and I just looked at certain key issues that I wanted to draw your attention to, but there are many, especially on access to justice and how you respond. There are quite a lot.
Yes.
So yeah.
There was a point earlier, Eva, I scanned through the model law. I didn't find it. Beatrice raised it in the morning about counseling to perpetrators. Is it covered?
Yes, yes, yes. If you go to the access provisions, those are covered there.
Very well.
But
Great stuff.
if there's any more that the lawyers want to add, we'll be very happy to take them on board. Please
Thank
just
you.
make specific, if you can help us at this stage, make more direct comments, and we'll take them into account. You don't have to do it now, but you go home. I think you can still more send your comments to us, enhancing the provisions.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Eva. Any other intervention, comments? Are you happy with the model law? Do you have
I think Lero.
Yes, Mremo.
had a hand up.
Good afternoon. I feel bad because I feel I'm asking too many questions.
You need to ask more. We encourage you to ask more.
Thank you, Prof. I was going to say, alongside these that Madam Eva was presenting, I want to know first and foremost the data pull from research and how it has informed this particular model law. And when you were talking about education earlier on, before we went for lunch, I wanted to know at what point are you talking about education and where are you going to start? I'm thinking, if you're talking about gender-based violence and you're here in the schools in South Africa where I am, 9-year-olds stabbing each other. There was a girl in Venda who went and committed suicide because she was, even though it was not gender-based violence, but I have had cases when I do my presentations as well of violence in the school. So when we say education, and earlier on, Prof. Ngake was saying, make the language as simple as it can. And I'm thinking, as technology and as smart as it can, I'm thinking, how is these conversations really going to filter down to the general citizenry? That is just my take on it. And Justice Sanji Manareng, I'm curious because I've always wanted to ask you this question, what is the research and information that we're getting from the international world as regards the status of gender-based violence? I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Justice Dingake would be in a better position to answer this question. He is the researcher and internationally renowned.
Thank you.
Mremo,
Say.
what was your question?
Now my question was, what is the research showing, Prof? What is the research showing about the status of GBV across the globe? And I'm not saying that we must compare with Africa, but just so that we know whether the thermometer is reading the same way. How is it out? How is it there? What are you hearing on the ground?
Okay, I can quickly answer that. I don't have the exact figures, but in the paper that I'm going to send, I think it has more details around that, but it's as pervasive as it could be. It's quite widespread in everywhere. Actually, there's no, even in advanced democracies, even in the most exalted halls of prestige and working environments, sexual harassment in particular is pervasive. Sexual offenses against minors are on the rise. You must have followed events recently in New York, involving the governor there, and that's just a mirror reflection of what is happening. And you must have followed a year or 2 years ago another issue of sexual harassment involving the very top echelons at the United Nations. So it's even us who are speaking against it now.
Some are perpetrators.
We are from here at the end of this seminar, we do exactly that. I think that speaks to the fact, as I said earlier, that norms are good. We have to, there are governance instruments, there are tools of governance, as Eva said, but on their own, they are not adequate, you know. So generally, I think Sanji in the morning, she mentioned something like 1 out of 2 women globally report some form of sexual violence. But it is pervasive, and there is no country that you can say is really an exception. So it's quite widespread.
Thank you, sir.
Your first question.
Excuse me.
You never answered her first question, Judge, relating to education, because she also said, how does the data that we have gathered inform the model law, especially on issues like education? Yeah, we had very good researchers on this program, and they came up with quite a lot of data, and then you have to read. It's a very big report that they came up with. But what we did after understanding what they were saying, we actually tried to bring into the model law the issues on education. So if you go to page 123 of the model law, that is section 61, you'll find we've dealt with it specifically. Education and social measures to empower women and children, because that's where actually the emphasis was. So the minister responsible for education shall establish programs to support the retention of children, especially girls in school, support positive discrimination and broadening opportunities in relation to education for women and girls, poor performers, and those with special needs, support innovative programs for adolescent girls that provides alternatives to marriage, target families in communities where child marriage and gender-based violence is prevalent by providing advocacy programs on the consequences of child marriage and gender-based violence, and support awareness programs in primary and secondary schools on sexual reproductive health matters and the consequences of gender. So it goes on for nearly how many pages? Another page. So yes, we actually use the data collected by our researchers to inform the provisions of the GBV law. And I was very careful about that. I wanted it to be based on real information and not on a theory. So that's what we did.
Thank you very much.
Chair, let me just say to Moremo Olo, that what you are saying about the pervasiveness and in countries and institutions is so true. There has just been a report on the International Criminal Court where I worked, and we were shocked. At least I was shocked, because as judges, you are insulated from what goes on a daily basis. We were shocked to find that sexual violence is so pervasive inside the court. They were not mentioning names, young girls and young boys, but it appears even the judges were doing it. So
Yes.
it's a worldwide phenomenon, and it's bad. It's really, really bad. Even in the in the Netherlands herself, well, there have been so many reports of GBV, and in other courts, as you know, the Hague is the seat of courts. We have had horror stories. Yeah. So
Yes, no, that's very true, including
Thank
in
you.
churches. It's in churches, it's in schools, it's demeaning, it's everything is disempowering, is well known, but what is shocking is the slow rate at which governments are moving to arrest the phenomenon, not just in terms of legislation, but perhaps ahead of legislation is education. Education is so critical, but exactly how governments can roll out, whether they have educational programs in place, is neither here nor there. And as I said earlier, the truth of the matter is that they are de facto accomplices to actually what is happening. In fact, maybe we increasingly need a new generation of lawyers who can now approach the courts to force duty bearers to do something. Because the state is a duty, it bears a particular duty. And we haven't heard of any lawyers rushing to court or being rejected by the courts in saying, look, you need to order government to do A, B, C, D, which is permissible.
And when you say that, Prof, I just remember, I'm reminded of how then Madam Eva and the team are going to proceed. And I'm thinking, perhaps it's time to name and shame. Perhaps some billboards and signages saying that you too, etc., etc. So perhaps we need to know that it's not those who are underprivileged, because the assumption all the time is that is amongst the group of alcoholics, those who live in rural villages and the unemployed. Perhaps now we must begin to have platforms or campaigns where we actually say, without even naming people, say even the number one people or the number one citizens are doing. Because I think the assumption here is that it doesn't happen in these offices, it happens in the bundus, etc., etc. And Opa Mokone, a journalist from Botswana, says, to be quite honest with you, Madam Eva, we've failed the very same people who are claiming to be custodians of. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Hall.
Thank you very much.
Very useful.
Correct.
Very useful. Yes. Any other comments? Any other comments? And Sally, do you have any questions from the messages you are getting?
Not additional ones. Those were the ones that had been raised in the chat box are the ones that we have gone through over.
Okay. Okay. Any comments? Eva, you are done completely, isn't it?
I'm done completely, sir.
Yes. If there are no interventions, of course, we're just giving you an overview. And as Eva was saying, this is aspirational. Okay, a model law is aspirational. It's for developing countries that are struggling to get expertise, technical expertise. This is just such a huge resource on its own to tap into without involving a lot of expenses and so forth. So we are hoping that the lawyers can use this and also guide them in the debates that can emanate in national jurisdictions, and also take time to read the model law. No country is forced to import everything as framed. Right. They can choose as they go that which is suitable to their own circumstances. And that is the beauty of the model law. But ultimately, there may be other countries that actually would like to take as much as they can from the model law. Even then, that is sufficiently beautiful. Yes. Any other comments? If there are no comments, we will draw to a close earlier, Madam SG. Maybe an hour earlier. I don't know what your thoughts are. I know the last item on the agenda, there is one more speaker who is supposed to come at the end. Do you have any wisdom to posit, SG, before I bring the curtains down? Madam SG?
I'm trying to maneuver the icons. Yes. No. Just to observe that we may need more time in the future for these consultations, because there are more questions and a lot of areas coming forth that we may need to consider when we have much more time. But otherwise, mine is just an appreciation. I don't have any issues or considerations to add at this point. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. I know Linda is somewhere. Linda? Linda, can you hear me? Are you around? Naidu?
Yes, Judge, I hear you.
I decided to pick you, hoping you will forgive me in case you have something.
No, I just want to commend the presentations today. I think Eva's presentation was excellent. It depicts a very comprehensive view of the SADC model law. It takes into consideration all of the topical issues, in the region. And my compliments, Eva. Very well done. A very good and comprehensive presentation. Well put together. We really see your passion driving through when you presented. Thank you for an excellent piece of work. And to you as well, Judge, thank you so much for providing that foundation for the discussion today. Both commendable work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Well, before I'll call then on Vincia, SADC LA Executive Committee member, the Lost Side of Namibia, to give conclusive and solidarity remarks. The floor is yours.
Good day, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, and see you.
And see me, thank you. So all protocol has been observed, and in my salutations, I really don't want to go through the list again, but remains observed this afternoon or wherever you are in the time frame that you find yourself. Your Excellency, Honorable Justices, honorable members, learned colleagues, and distinguished members of the legal profession, the SADC Parliamentary Forum Model Law on GBV seeks to provide guidance on the scope and content of GBV provisions to be provided for in national GBV laws. It further seeks to support the implementation of national laws and to serve as a yardstick to national policy analysts, legislators, and implementers for best practices in enacting and dealing with GBV. If domesticated, the model law will help participating SADC member states to meet their international commitments expressed in ratified international and regional law standards, such as the CEDAW and the CRC, which call upon state members or state parties to take legislative and policy measures to advance the human rights of women and children and to protect them from abuse. Adhering states will find it easy to incorporate provisions speaking to the protection of survivors and standards that prevent this practice, as many of these standards are already constructed in great details in the model law. The model law, if domesticated by SADC member states, will further reinforce a regional approach in dealing with GBV laws, measures, and strategies to help eliminate GBV. So at this stage, I just want to allow you to give our profound gratitude to our Vice President of SADC Lawyers Association, Mrs. Vembai Niema, for delivering our welcoming remarks. The former ICC judge, the current judge of SADC Tribunal, Honorable Justice Sanji Monacheng, for delivering our keynote address. Honorable Justice Professor Ki Dinkhaka, for presenting the theoretical and background papers on GBV. The GBV community advocate from Malawi, Ms. Beatrice Mateo, for her statement. The organizers of the event, under the able leadership of the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Ms. Buma Sekoma, and the Technical Working Group, the legal drafter of the GBV Model Law, Ms. Eva Jala, for development of a holistic and transformative model law on GBV, and that very comprehensive and insightful presentation that she made this today. And to you, our distinguished delegates, for your participation and insightful inputs into the draft model law. And I call upon you to raise awareness of the model law on GBV in your communities of influence across the region, with the aim to ensure that no one is left behind. I thank you. Muito obrigado. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very short and to the point. And as you say, one cannot overemphasize that this is just the beginning. We need lawyers and everyone to sell this idea and the contents of the model law to as many as possible of our people, institutions, so that we can make this place a better place to live for everyone, men and women alike, boys and girls alike. So we thank you again, Madam Secretary General, for your continuing pioneering work on model laws. Don't tire. In the course of time, history will absolve you. But it's always necessarily going to take time. But the foundations are being laid systematically under your leadership. Don't tire. The fruits will come one day, even if it is long after you have departed this world. We'll be able to make reference to this particular point in the journey towards equality for all. Thank you very much. I don't know whether there are any housekeeping announcements by anyone. There is a hand up. It must be the Secretary General. It looks like the floor is yours.
Apologies, it's a clapping of hands, not a raised hand.
Oh,
Apologies,
yes,
bro. Just also maybe at this point, we will share the roadmap on these consultations so that as we continue to share what is happening, we can have more of your expertise on board to share more of your wisdom in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Eva, if you meet the new kid on the block in the continent, give him a present of this model law.
Oh, I should actually.
Give him a
I wish I had
present.
taken it
Tell
with
him
me
that
yesterday.
tell him that as the new dawn, among other things, Mr. President-elect, I have a document to hand over to you. And this is the document that we hope Zambia can lead. That may happen, you know, and
Yes,
that may be
it's
useful.
Both of them, the
yes.
marriage one and this one.
Yes. Any other? No other announcements, Madam Secretary General. Please permit me then to close today's meeting. To thank you once again for your attendance and your efforts. Please continue the good work. Thank you very much. Much appreciated to everybody.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for your support.
Thank
It
you.
really
All.
helped.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Informative. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
experience.
With
Bye,
you.
good people.
Bye.
Great attendance. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Bye.
Can we
Bye.
terminate or
Bye.
not?